Thank you very much, Denis, and thank you, Jean-Michel. I think that the European University Institute has done excellent work in integrating the energy and the climate change dimension, and we are very much appreciative of that. And it will be my pleasure today to review where we are today in the EU, where we are internationally, and what kind of policy questions we may have to address. And this is a golden opportunity to go into discussion with one another. So, where are we today? We are in Florence. Can someone help me out, please? Okay, thank you very much. So, where are we today? I think if we look back over the last 20 years, we have been successful in Europe to decouple the GDP deployment and also the growth in manufacturing from emissions on carbon dioxide. I think since 1990 and 2010, the last historical figures that are reliable on this, I think we can have our heads up. We have done what was promised by our political environment. So how did we go into that direction? I think it has been essential to have targets. And the first target that we were setting for ourselves was Kyoto. And the Kyoto target is up for delivery at the end of this year, 2012. And I think that we can have our heads up. The European Union delivered all its promises in terms of emission reductions, technology support, financial support, etc. Now in Europe, we also already set our targets unilaterally for 2020. You know, the 20% greenhouse gas emission reduction for 2020 measured on 1990 levels, and I think we are today already at -14. We have a 20% renewables target, and we have the 20% energy efficiency target that is currently being discussed in the Council and the European Parliament. Now, how did we get there, and how did the targets work out? Of course, there are lots of structural changes that are taking place in the European economy, less manufacturing, more services, etc. But I think also that our policies have been paying off. And I would like to highlight three sorts of policies. The first is the ETS. The carbon market, the price signal, has been established and is still there. People ask ourselves, where are we going? And I'm coming to that question in a minute. But we can say we have a functioning and a liquid market. And what is sometimes underrepresented is that the current ETS directive has a long-term clarity on reductions. That is, that every year between now and 2050, every year carbon dioxide reductions of the covered sectors will be 1.74% less. That is a significant reduction factor because that means that by 2050, we will have in emissions that are 70% lower compared to where we were in 1990. So that's a significant factor, and without any change to that factor, I think we are on a long-term path that should create clarity to many of you involved in the sectors. But there are lots of challenges ahead. The carbon leakage debate and the manufacturing industry that consumes a lot of industry is making all the time an argumentation about competitiveness, and if the rest of the world is not going to move also into climate policy, that is becoming an important argument. We had fraud in the system, and you may have noticed that as part of the financial market regulation, we also now have a chapter on the ETS market, and we have the question on whether ETS has been and will be an effective incentive for new technologies. And that's where I would like to bring forward the price development that we have seen on the market. And you will see that up until 2011, prices went down a little bit, but that could be expected because of the recession that we had in Europe. But since the end of 2011, prices were going deeply in a one single-digit mood between 6 and 8 euros. So we studied the situation, and our energy and environment ministers, not more than a couple of weeks ago, had a very important discussion in Denmark, and they decided, in fact, three things. The first thing they decided was that ETS is there, and that ETS should function also in the future as the predominant instrument for carbon dioxide reduction. I think there was unanimous support for the ETS in the room. The second point that they decided upon was that we would not go into direct price management. It was decided not to go for floor prices or things like that, because I think we may say in the European Union, when we worked with price controls, it did not work out that well. But the third thing that they decided was that we are facing up to exceptional challenges, and so an exceptional market intervention may be needed. And that is now being prepared. The question is what kind of market intervention we may see. And one route has been and is being prepared, that is that the auctioning pattern, the pattern according to which we are going to be allowances for auctioning to the market, is going to be modified so that we will bring less allowances to the market as of 2013, and then we will have a kind of backloading and see what we are going to do with it later in the period. Brings to the question on the structural measures. Shall we set aside definitely these allowances, or shall we already open up a debate for 2030 targets, a debate that has not been sorted out, and that is, as you may have noticed, is a debate that is currently taking place in the Brussels arena. So we will hear on the structural solutions more information, but on the backloading of auctioning allowances, I think that is the way we are going to go this year in the short term. That means that before the summer holiday, the Commission intends to make a proposal on this issue. The other star measure, of course, is renewables policy. It has been debated already today here at large. I will walk over relatively quickly over it. But very important was that through the renewables policy, we could bring a corner solution up to a mainstream solution. And that requires a lot of new questions to be replied. But very important is that the 20% target that was put up is already delivered up to 12% today. Still an 8% to go, an important 8% I would have to say. But lots of questions still have to be sorted out related to the support systems. How long are we going to take the support systems? What is the role of a renewables target in the light of a 2030 target, and things like that. The third measure that I would like to bring your attention to is energy efficiency. We have, of course, the debate on the Energy Efficiency Directive on the table, and there is good progress on that front. But I think it's very important that we have already many energy efficiency standards and energy labels. And perhaps the most important measure so far we could agree upon was the CO2 standards for cars. I think if you go to a showroom today for buying a new car and you compare to when you last were in that showroom 3-5 years ago, you will notice that cars on average have become 20 to 25% more energy efficient, and that's an average. And I think that the CO2 regulation on cars, 130 grams for 2015, that is being delivered by the car industry, and the next step, 95 grams for 2020, is being prepared legislatively those days as we speak, and the car industry also supports that 95 grams. So I think that on energy efficiency, we know it's very challenging to keep up to the standards, but we are very motivated to tap that possibility there. So the question is, where are we going to the long term? And as Philip Lowe was indicating in the preceding session, together with our colleagues from the Energy and the Transport departments, we were making a roadmap, and that roadmap indicates a few important elements. That is that with existing technology, we can deliver the minus 85% target that heads of state were already agreeing upon for 2050. Another important conclusion is that the 2030 target is presumably going to be or have to be around minus 40% compared to 1990 levels, and that the main sectors delivering for 2030 the emission reductions is going to be the power sector and the manufacturing sector, while the biggest emission reduction will have to be delivered by transport after 2030. So that is provisionally where the picture is for the 2050 target. And of course, what was just said by Carlo Carraro is what is the major element that we have been indicating. That means that a lot of investments will be necessary to bring about the changes in the energy sector, but also the energy efficiency improvements that we will require. But the good news is that the amount of investments that is considerable could be paid off with the revenues that are going to be raised through those efforts. Of course, the time pattern is not always when you do the investment that you reap the benefits, but that is what needs to be hammered out through the policy that is going to land on our table later on. So what we are currently doing, apart from the elements I was indicating, that is that the EU budget is possibly an important way to have our attention focused on when it comes to the mainstreaming of the investment needs that we may have. The built environment, the transport and the power sector are certainly areas where lots of fresh investments can be incentivized through the MFF, the multi-annual financial framework that is currently on the table. But that is on the table of the negotiations in Council and Parliament, and that's a voice, if we want to go that way, that needs to be reinforced by all those involved in the negotiations. The second important thing is exploiting the internal energy market. The element was raised in all its facets by Philip Lowe just a moment ago, but we have a completely joined-in agenda between climate change and the internal energy market. It goes without saying the electricity market, but also the potential that is recently offered through the lower gas prices, and the MFF proposal that is bringing 9 billion for energy infrastructure under the Connecting Europe facility. So a brief word on the international developments. In Durban, we agreed that by 2050 we would have a new agreement, very different perhaps to what we may expect compared to the Kyoto Protocol. What is going to be different, and that agreement was made, that is that all large emitters have to be brought on the table, also the emerging economies, also the United States. So that is the essence of the agreement in Durban. And in the meantime, a lot of action is taking place. I think that's the positive side of Copenhagen. In Copenhagen, we did not have a deal, but we had lots of pledges that are now being followed through, not least in Korea, for example, or in China or in Australia, where ETS systems are being set up. And I think if that is going to take shape, and we are able to link up our European ETS with those new ETS systems, I think that is going to make an important change, putting a price on carbon. Where the development is less good is, of course, when we look at the United States, where the debate has fallen back. And I think we will have to do a major effort in the international community to bring the issue back on the table as of next year. An element that is going to be very prominently on the table is trade and climate change. The emerging economies are increasingly making the element or the argumentation that our climate policy may be protectionist. And we have to explain to them that that is not at all our intention. But you know that we are including international aviation under the ETS, and that has provoked quite a significant amount of questions. So just to finalize, I have a number of questions to you, because we have lots of challenges for 2030. We have an idea, a quite concrete idea, that by 2030 we may have to reduce our emissions by some 40% compared to 1990 levels. How are we going to draw on the lessons from the past? Separate targets for greenhouse gas emissions, energy efficiency and renewables, on equal footing or not? How are these targets that are maybe set, how are they going to be articulated one against another? Which kind of instruments are we going to rely on? I think that the value of the ETS is that it is one single carbon market price for the entire European Union, which makes a fully harmonized policy measure that I think we should nurture. but it may need some fresh argumentation in one or the other part of Europe. How are we going to combine climate change, energy security and competitiveness? Because as Mr. Mandil was just concluding the preceding section, a lot has happened over the last 20 years. I would even add a lot has happened over the last 2 years. Look at the gas situation today. Gas is much cheaper for the shale gas development in the United States. The nuclear, the prospect for nuclear development is widely debated following the Fukushima accident, and the increased technology competition, in particular on the renewables, where we see that the emerging economies like China are very present in the wind energy, increasingly in wind energy, in the solar panel industry, etc. So these are three very important elements that come to the fore, and I think that a new policy discussion in the light of 2030 will have to address also these new elements so as to make sure that climate change, internal market, competitiveness and energy security are being as successfully combined for the future as they were in the past. Thank you very much.